Hello, Wellspring. Today is January 17th. We're continuing our scripture reading for the year of 2025. This morning we're going to be reading Genesis 37. So we're taking a couple chapter jump. As you recall, last time we were talking about the ladder that Jacob sees in his dream with the angels ascending and descending. Now we're going to jump ahead about 8 or 9 chapters, to chapter 37, where we're going to be beginning into the story of Joseph and his family and how he ends up in Egypt and all of that journey. So jump in with us as we start in again on Genesis chapter 37, and I'll be reading from the NIV. Jacob lived in the land where his father had stayed, the land of Canaan. This is the account of Jacob's family line. Joseph, a young man of 17, was tending the flocks with his brothers, the sons of Bilhah and the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives, and he brought their father a bad report about them. Now Israel loved Joseph more than any of his other sons, because he had been born to him in old age, and he had made an ornate robe for him. When his brothers saw that their father loved him more than any of them, they hated him and could not speak a kind word to him. Joseph had a dream, and when he told it to his brothers, they hated him all the more. He said to them, "Listen to this dream I had. We were binding sheaves of grain out in the field, when suddenly my sheaf rose up and stood upright, while your sheaves gathered around mine and bowed down to it." His brothers said to him, "Do you intend to reign over us? Will you actually rule us?" And they hated him all the more because of his dream and what he had said. Then he had another dream, and he told it to his brothers. "Listen," he said, "I had another dream, and this time the sun and moon and 11 stars were bowing down to me." When he told his father as well as his brothers, his father rebuked him and said, "What is this dream you had? Will your mother and I bow, and your brothers come and actually bow down to the ground before you?" His brothers were jealous of him, but his father kept the matter in mind. Now his brothers had gone to graze their father's flocks near Shechem, and Israel said to Joseph, "As you know, your brothers are grazing their flocks near Shechem. Come, I'm going to send you to them." "Very well," he replied. So he said to him, "Go and see if all's well with your brothers and with the flocks, and bring word back to me." Then he sent him off from the valley of Hebron. When Joseph arrived at Shechem, a man found him wandering around in the fields and asked him, "What are you looking for?" He replied, "I'm looking for my brothers. Can you tell me where they're grazing the flocks?" "They have moved on from here," the man answered. "I heard them say, 'Let's go to Dothan.'" So Joseph went after his brothers and found them near Dothan. But they saw him in the distance, and before he reached them, they plotted to kill him. "Here comes the dreamer," they said to each other. "Come now, let's kill him and throw him into one of these cisterns and say that a ferocious animal devoured him. Then we'll see what comes of his dreams." When Reuben heard this, he tried to rescue him from their hands. "Let's not take his life," he said. "Don't shed any blood. Throw him into the cistern here in the wilderness, but don't lay a hand on him." Reuben said this to rescue him from them and take him back to his father. So when Joseph came to his brothers, they stripped him of his robe, the ornate robe he was wearing, and they took him and threw him into the cistern. The cistern was empty. There was no water in it. As they sat down to eat their meal, they looked up and saw a caravan of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead. Their camels were loaded with spices, balm, and myrrh, and they were on their way to take them down to Egypt. Judah said to his brothers, "What will we gain if we kill our brother and cover up his blood? Come, let's sell him to the Ishmaelites and not lay our hands on him. After all, he is our brother, our own flesh and blood." His brothers agreed. So when the Midianite merchants came by, his brothers pulled Joseph up out of the cistern and sold him for 20 shekels of silver to the Ishmaelites, who took him to Egypt. When Reuben returned to the cistern and saw that Joseph was not there, he tore his clothes. He went back to his brothers and said, "The boy isn't there. Where can I turn now?" Then they got Joseph's robe, slaughtered a goat, and dipped the robe in the blood. They took the ornate robe back to their father and said, "We found this. Examine it to see whether it is your son's robe." He recognized it and said, "It is my son's robe. Some ferocious animal has devoured him. Joseph has surely been torn to pieces." Then Jacob tore his clothes, put on sackcloth, and mourned for his son many days. All his sons and daughters came to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted. "No," he said, "I will continue to mourn until I join my son in the grave." So his father wept for him. Meanwhile, the Midianites sold Joseph in Egypt to Potiphar, one of Pharaoh's officials, the captain of the guard. So, what an interesting way to start your story in the Bible. For Joseph to show up, we find out he's the youngest of these sons. He's favored. He's given a special robe, and he knows he's favored, and his other brothers know that he's favored, and so the brothers are jealous. They are frustrated by it. How come Dad has favored you? Why does Dad care about you more? And then Joseph gets this special robe. And it's, the coat of many colors. It's an ornate, it's like a dress robe that would have been, just to the nines. It's everything that you could want in a robe. And it's given to Joseph, who's the youngest, 17 years old. And they're frustrated by this. And then this same young man who you're already frustrated by starts having these dreams where he has these the sheaves of grain that bow down to him. And then the stars and the moon and the sun, they bow down to him. And then he's not wise enough to keep those to himself and ponder them in his heart. Instead, he goes to his brothers, to his father, to his mother, and begins to say, "Hey, check this out. I had these dreams. You guys are going to bow down and worship me. You guys are going to bow before me. I'm going to rule over you." So he's not exactly using his best wits there either. And perhaps is operating a little bit of arrogance. Perhaps the being spoiled, being the favorite, has elevated him to a place where he acts in some of that pride or arrogance. And it doesn't directly say that he's acting in pride and arrogance in Scripture, but we can use some of our imagination to recognize what's happening in the story. We can see it unfolding. We get the facts. The facts are he does get these dreams, but that he also tells the dreams. And he tells the first dream and there's a bad response. And he gets the second dream and he still decides, I'm going to go ahead and tell this dream. Just interesting to see that happen and to begin to think, what's happening in Joseph's life? What's happening in these brothers' lives? So Joseph ends up being sent out to find his brothers out in the flocks. And the oldest son, Reuben, spares him from being killed by the other brothers, but they still take him and they sell him into slavery. And he ends up being sold to Potiphar in Egypt, right? And they take his robe, this ornate robe, the sign of his favor, of the favor that he has with Jacob, his father, dip it in blood. They take it back and they show the father. And now the pride and the anger and the frustration and the jealousy that's been festering within this family among these brothers now creates an extreme amount of pain and grief for the father. It's got family lying to each other. It's got them treating each other terribly. It's got them lying to their father. And now their father's struck in this deep grief where he feels like he's lost his son. He believes his favorite son has been killed, right? Is dead to wild animals. A couple videos back, we just talked about how Scripture isn't condoning everything that it records, but it's just recording the stories as they happen. And then that we have to recognize that God is the hero of these stories, that God is the hero of the Old Testament. God is the hero of the New Testament. God's the hero of Scripture. And so we have to take these difficult stories where we see this family turmoil and remember that we're looking for what God's action is in it. What is God doing? What is God saying? Where is God leading? And we're going to see how God uses this broken space, this broken family, this family with a lot of turmoil that has hate in their hearts towards each other, that has deceit towards each other, towards their father, that has arrogance and pride mixed into it, right? We're going to see how God starts to step in and use even this brokenness and even this space for His glory, for His will to be accomplished, for everything that God has promised to be brought to fulfillment. And so I just want to encourage you this morning, if you are in a space where you might say, man, I feel some of that. Some of my family has felt like that. Perhaps some of my interactions with my siblings were difficult like that. Perhaps there's been deceit or broken relationships. I would just challenge you this morning to say, God, where can I go? What steps can I take to forgive places that I need to forgive? And are there things that I could do to alleviate some of the pressure and tension within even my own family? Even some of the broken relationships that I might have, perhaps with a brother or a sister, or with a mother or a father. Is there something that you can own and say, there's space here where I didn't act appropriately, where perhaps my pride got in the way, or perhaps I didn't use good sense and I said something that might have been true, like Joseph telling the dream, but at a bad time, in a wrong moment where it comes across as arrogant and prideful. Is there something that you need to confess? Is there hatred that's been harbored in your heart, or jealousy that's been harbored in your heart over one of your parents, or both of your parents perhaps favoring one of your siblings over you, or whatever that might be? I just would challenge you to take a look at your family, take a look at what's going on in your experience of family, and ask God to begin to heal you in it, in the spaces that are broken, and to use you as a tool for healing that space. Or perhaps some of your family isn't around anymore, and all you can do at this point is just say, God, I want to forgive and release, because the things that I harbor in my heart are actually hindering me. They're the things that have me in the bottom of a dry cistern. They're the things that have me sold into slavery to the Ishmaelites. They're the things that are making it appear to me in my life that I'm stuck in bondage now, because I can't forgive and I can't let these things go. So just challenge you to be thinking about that, to trust the Lord, and to receive these scriptures and recognize that God uses broken people. God uses broken situations. And even when it looks its bleakest, when you're sold into slavery by your brothers, God can have his hand in it, and God can minister to you, and God never leaves, never forsakes, stays with you in all things. God bless you, Wellspring. Have a great day.